They don't want you to know what's hiding in this ancient book. The Tibetan Book of the Dead reveals life's ultimate secrets and forces you to confront the truth of the bardo, a place where souls linger in chaos. Your attachments and inner self are revealed in ways you cannot escape. Tune in now, because the key to breaking free from endless rebirth waits for the bold who dare to look closer, finding liberation beyond the veil. Ever wondered if there's some ancient book out there that spills all the secrets about death and what happens next? Well, there is, kind of. It's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, if you want to sound fancy. This isn't just any dusty old text. It's like a survival guide for navigating the wild unknown after death. Think of it as a cosmic GPS for the soul, but don't get too excited yet. It's not exactly an easy read, and not everyone's going to nail the instructions. The key to mastering the afterlife lies hidden, waiting to be unlocked. The book dives deep into what's called the bardo, a trippy in-between zone where your soul hangs out after death, but before it picks its next life. Apparently, this isn't just a void or a waiting room. It's a full-on journey packed with mind-blowing experiences. And let's get one thing straight. This isn't some walk in the park. It's all about recognizing the clear light of reality when you die. Miss it, and you're back on the hamster wheel of life, stuck in the endless rebirth loop. Sounds exhausting, doesn't it? Here's the kicker. This clear light isn't some external divine flash. It's already in you. It's like realizing you've had the answers on the back of your hand the whole time. But, and this is a big but, most of us are too distracted by, well, everything. Attachments, fears, bad habits, you name it. We're like moths flapping around a light bulb, missing the actual spotlight. And then come the deities. Peaceful ones, wrathful ones. It's like a parade of your deepest fears and wildest dreams. Spoiler alert, they're not real. Nope, they're all projections of your mind. Mirrors showing you what's inside. Sounds comforting? Maybe, maybe not. The trick is recognizing these beings as part of your consciousness. Do that, and boom, liberation. Fail to see it, and you're back to square one, picking out a new life like you're shopping for shoes. Now, if all this sounds a bit intense, don't worry. The book also lays out some hands-on advice. We're talking meditations, rituals, and chants that'll supposedly make the whole process a little smoother. And these aren't just for the one who's dying. The living can get involved too, helping their loved ones navigate the bardo from the sidelines. It's like a cosmic team effort. But here's where things get real. This isn't just about what happens after you die. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is throwing down some serious truths about how you're living right now. It's screaming at you to wake up, see through the illusions, and understand that everything, yes, everything, isn't what it seems. It's all in your head. And once you get that, you're free. No more rebirths, no more endless cycles, just liberation. Of course, it's easier said than done. This whole idea of breaking free from the cycle of life and death sounds amazing until you realize it takes serious work. We're talking lifelong spiritual practice, facing your fears, letting go of everything you think matters, and recognizing the true nature of reality. Not exactly light reading, right? The Tibetan Book of the Dead doesn't stop there. It goes deeper, stressing the importance of preparation. This isn't just a last-minute cram session for the dying. It's a lifelong curriculum. The teachings encourage a complete shift in perspective, a way of seeing life as a constant practice for that ultimate moment. The bardo state is not a random test. It's the culmination of everything you've done to prepare your mind. Another key point the book makes is that the journey doesn't happen in isolation. The rituals it outlines often involve family and community, creating a shared experience. These practices, like reciting sacred texts or guiding meditations, aren't just symbolic. They're thought to create real connections, offering support to the one navigating the afterlife. This communal aspect reflects the broader Buddhist value of interdependence, the idea that no one exists completely separate from others. And then, there's the focus on compassion. If you think the Tibetan Book of the Dead is all about the individual's escape, think again. The teachings repeatedly point to the idea that true liberation involves helping others. Whether you're guiding someone through the bardo or just being there for them in life, your actions have ripple effects. Compassion becomes both a practice and a purpose. The descriptions of the bardo are another layer worth unpacking. This isn't some vague spiritual mumbo-jumbo. The text goes into vivid detail, describing what the consciousness encounters, from peaceful visions to terrifying illusions. These are said to be reflections of your own mind, magnified in the bardo state. The peaceful deities embody the best aspects of your consciousness, while the wrathful ones reveal fears and unresolved issues. Recognizing them as projections is the ultimate test of self-awareness. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. These experiences aren't random. They're tailored, in a way, to each individual's mind. The Tibetan Book of the Dead suggests that what you encounter in the bardo is shaped by how you've lived your life. Your fears, attachments, and mental habits all play a role. It's like looking into a cosmic mirror, seeing not just your face, but your entire inner world laid bare. This idea ties back to the larger theme of responsibility. The book isn't just handing out advice, it's holding up a mirror and asking you to take a hard look. Are you ready to face yourself? Have you done the work to understand your own mind? These questions aren't just rhetorical, they're the heart of the teachings. Even if you're skeptical about the spiritual aspects, there's a lot to take away. The Tibetan Book of the Dead challenges you to live with awareness, to confront your fears, and to embrace impermanence. It's a reminder that life and death aren't separate. They're two sides of the same coin, constantly shaping each other. Just when it starts making sense, the next step pulls you even deeper, that they too are pure manifestations of the mind. Their wrathful forms are just another reflection of the bardo being's own nature. It's a test, a challenge to see through the terror and recognize that all of this is coming from within. If the bardo being recognizes that the peaceful or wrathful deities are simply reflections of their own mind, they achieve something extraordinary, merging inseparably with the lights and forms of the deities, attaining Buddhahood. This is their second chance to break free from samsara, the constant loop of dying and starting over. But let's be real, it's no easy task. Fear, confusion, and doubt are often too overwhelming. And what happens if fear takes over? Liberation slips through their grasp. The peaceful deities transform into Mahakala, the protector of Dharma, and the wrathful deities morph into Yama Dharmaraja, the lord of Buddhist hells. Yama's presence is as vast as the sky, and he doesn't come quietly. Picture him holding a slate listing all past actions, giving commands of strike and kill, while performing gruesome acts like severing heads and ripping out organs. It's enough to make the bardo being faint in terror, and when they awaken, the opportunity for liberation is gone. From here, the bardo being enters the third stage, the bardo of rebirth. This stage is where karma steps in to decide their next destination. The possibilities? They could be reborn into the realm of gods, jealous gods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, or even hell. And the process of transformation begins with the appearance of womb entrances. The bardo being feels a pull toward one, and upon entering, conception occurs. Just like that, the pattern continues, and they're reborn into a new life. But as this phase of rebirth unfolds in the East, the West took these profound teachings and reshaped them into something entirely its own. The concept of bardo, with its vivid imagery and spiritual depth, found new life in Western interpretations and cultural reinventions. How the West reimagined bardo. Let's take a step back and remember something important. The Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just a philosophical text. It's a ritual guide meant to be read aloud to the dead. Its oral nature is key. Much of the text directly addresses the deceased with lines like, "O child of Buddha nature," offering encouragement and instructions for navigating the wild and often terrifying visions of the bardo states. When you read this text with its oral purpose in mind, even the more horrifying parts, like Yama drinking brains, start to make sense. They're not meant to shock for the sake of shock. Instead, they serve to guide and prepare the spirit for the challenges of the bardo. And about the name, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's a little misleading. It's not actually a standalone book, but a small section of a much larger text called Peaceful and Wrathful Deities, a natural liberation through recognition of enlightened intention. This context adds even more depth to a text already filled with wisdom, ritual, and cosmic imagery. The origins of the Tibetan Book of the Dead are steeped in legend and tradition, tracing back to the 8th century tantric master Padmasambhava, an important figure in Tibetan Buddhism. According to tradition, Padmasambhava foresaw that his teachings might one day be distorted or lost. To safeguard them, he devised a unique solution. He hid his teachings across the Tibetan landscape. These hidden treasures, called therma, meaning treasure, were concealed in caves, lakes, mountaintops, or even within the minds and hearts of future disciples, waiting to be discovered when the time was right. The people chosen to uncover these treasures are known as Tertons, treasure discoverers. It's believed that Tertons are reincarnations of Padmasambhava's closest disciples, handpicked by the master himself to rediscover and revive his teachings in later lifetimes. This tradition credits the Tibetan Book of the Dead as part of one such treasure. The story of its discovery is just as fascinating. In the 14th century, a 15-year-old boy named Karmalingpa, the son of a tantric master, is said to have found a collection of texts buried in a cave. Among them was the complete Peaceful and Wrathful Deities text, which includes the section we now call the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's a striking narrative, filled with mysticism and spiritual destiny. While this is the traditional story, many scholars approach it with skepticism. From their perspective, the therma texts are more likely the work of the Tertons themselves, with the attribution to Padmasambhava serving as a symbolic nod to his authority and influence, rather than literal authorship. Interestingly, while the Tibetan Book of the Dead is widely recognized and celebrated in the West, its prominence within Tibetan Buddhist practice isn't quite as grand. Tibetan Buddhists are often surprised by how much attention this single text, a small part of one of their many funerary traditions, has received abroad. It's a reminder that sometimes the spiritual spotlight shines in unexpected places. Some scholars argue that the Tibetan Book of the Dead has become more of an American spiritual classic than a Tibetan one. Why? It all starts with a guy named Walter Evans Wentz, the American who introduced the text to the Western world. Let's break it down. Evans Wentz wasn't your average academic. He was a theosophist, part of a late 19th century spiritual movement that blended Hinduism, Buddhism, and various esoteric traditions. In 1919, during a spiritual journey through India, Evans Wentz came across some Tibetan funerary texts. He didn't get them directly from Tibetan monks or scholars, though. He bought them from a British officer fresh from Tibet, which, at the time, was under British invasion. Problem? Evans Wentz couldn't actually read the texts. To figure out what they said, he traveled to northeast India and sought out Kazadawa Samdup, an English-language teacher known for helping Westerners translate religious texts. Samdup translated the funerary texts, and Evans Wentz published them in 1927 as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. He chose the title because he thought it resembled the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and believed both texts drew from some ancient universal wisdom. Evans Wentz even framed his relationship with Samdup as a spiritual one, describing himself as Samdup's disciple. In the preface of the first edition, he wrote, "I am seeking, so far as possible, to suppress my own views and act simply as the mouthpiece of a Tibetan sage, of whom I was a recognized disciple." This may sound dramatic at first, but scholar Don Lopez has pointed out that this so-called guru-disciple bond is questionable. According to their surviving letters, the two had a brief professional relationship lasting only a couple of months, hardly the spiritual mentorship Evans Wentz made it out to be. Despite this, Evans Wentz's work propelled the Tibetan Book of the Dead into Western consciousness. Its appeal was fueled by two main factors: a romanticized view of Tibet as a mystical, otherworldly place, and a universal human fascination with death. The desire to understand what happens after we die, paired with a dose of Orientalist fascination, helped turn this text into a cornerstone of Western spirituality, even if its prominence in actual Tibetan Buddhist practice is relatively minor. The Tibetan Book of the Dead found massive popularity in the West, particularly in the United States, among people drawn to spiritualism, esotericism, and altered states of consciousness. Its appeal spanned decades, from the 1930s and 1940s right through the counterculture movements of the 1960s. Carl Jung, as we mentioned earlier, lent credibility by writing introductions for several editions. And in 1964, Timothy Leary, the infamous psychedelic researcher, took things further. Along with a few collaborators, he published The Psychedelic Experience, a guide to navigating trips on illicit substances, explicitly inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Beyond its influence on spirituality and psychedelics, the text left its mark on Western culture at large. Films like Jacob's Ladder and Enter the Void borrow heavily from its ideas and imagery, weaving its themes into storytelling that resonates with modern audiences. But claiming that the Tibetan Book of the Dead is more American than Tibetan can feel offensive when you consider its origins. After all, it's written in the Tibetan language, performed by Tibetan Buddhist lamas, and deeply rooted in Tibetan traditions. Yet, through figures like Walter Evans Wentz and his successors, the text was reshaped and rebranded for an American audience, transforming its cultural significance along the way. This is a classic example of religious globalization. Sacred ideas from one culture often take on a new life when they interact with another. As scholar Don Lopez aptly points out, there's an irony in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's not really a book, nor is it strictly about death. It's fundamentally about healing, whether that's the awakening of souls or the rediscovery of thermatexts. Evans Wentz's version isn't so much a direct transmission of Tibetan Buddhist practice as it is an American reimagining. By isolating a few chapters from a larger pattern of texts, giving them an evocative new title, and layering on his own interpretations, he created something that resonated powerfully with Western audiences. The result? A text that continues to bridge and blur the lines between two very different worlds. As Don Lopez points out, the text is fundamentally about Buddhist rebirth. Yet, for American audiences, it's often read as a psychological or even psychedelic guide. This transformation highlights more than just cultural reinterpretation. It's a lesson in how religious authority and sacred texts evolve as they move between contexts. Think about it. Many religious traditions establish authority by connecting their text to prominent figures. Christians link books like the Gospel of John to apostles of Jesus, and Sikhs regard the Guru Granth Sahib as their eternal guru, maintaining continuity with the lineage of their 10 human gurus. Tibetan Buddhism follows a similar pattern, rooting the legitimacy of Therma texts in Padmasambhava's disciples, believed to reincarnate across generations to rediscover and reintroduce these teachings. Theosophists like Evans Wentz weren't exempt from this need for authority. By claiming to be a disciple of a lama, he aligned himself with the lineage of Karma Lingpa, the original revealer of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and, by extension, tied himself to Padmasambhava's ancient chain of authority. It's fascinating how this interplay of tradition, reinterpretation, and personal claims shaped the text's legacy in the West. This blending of ancient wisdom with modern reinterpretation didn't stop with scholars. It found its way into unexpected corners of culture. Like even the music scene was echoing the transformative ideas of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Music meets Tibetan wisdom. The 1960s were more than just about music. They were about exploring deeper meanings and pushing boundaries. Rock musicians of the era weren't satisfied with just making hits. They wanted to tap into something spiritual and transformative. Many of them looked to the ancient wisdom of the East, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead became a massive influence. One artist who took its ideas and ran with them was none other than John Lennon. Paul McCartney once shared that the final track on Revolver, Tomorrow Never Knows, was entirely Lennon's vision. During this period, some illicit substances were making waves, and Lennon had gotten his hands on Timothy Leary's version of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The ideas in the book fascinated him. Unlike the traditional British view of death as something dull and final, the text described death as a transformative journey. It compared dying to an epic voyage, similar to how the ancient Egyptians prepared their dead for the afterlife. For Lennon, this idea was electrifying. With those illicit substances opening his mind to new perspectives, the themes of the book resonated even more. It inspired him to create a song that captured the essence of these ideas. Tomorrow Never Knows became a bold and trippy exploration of life, death, and the unknown. It was Lennon channeling the wisdom of an ancient text into something revolutionary. The book itself contains one of its most famous lines: "Whenever in doubt, turn off your mind, relax, float downstream." Sound familiar? That's because John Lennon borrowed it and transformed it into the lyrics of his first psychedelic anthem, Tomorrow Never Knows. But Lennon didn't want to go full philosopher without a little twist. He knew the best way to weave spirituality into music was to add a touch of playfulness. As he explained, "That's me in my Tibetan Book of the Dead period. I took one of Ringo's malapropisms as the title to sort of take the edge off the heavy philosophical lyrics." And just like that, a deep spiritual concept became part of a song that was as trippy as it was relatable. Now, let's talk about Leonard Cohen. For some reason, the idea of him playing tennis is oddly funny. But that's exactly what the monks at a Buddhist monastery had him doing. When Cohen retreated to the monastery, the monks noticed something right away. He was too serious. Their advice? Loosen up. They sent him to the tennis courts, insisting he needed to learn how to play, not just work. This experience left a lasting impression on Cohen, who embraced the lesson wholeheartedly. Long after he hung up his racket, he shared the mantra that stuck with him: lighten up. That's what enlightenment means, to lighten up. Leave it to Cohen to turn a bit of Buddhist wisdom into something profound, yet effortlessly cool. For Leonard Cohen, the idea of separating yourself from the grind was transformative. It became the foundation of much of his later work, which radiated the sense of peace he discovered through this liberated mindset. Feeling deeply grateful for the inspiration, Cohen decided to give back in a way that felt meaningful. He lent his iconic voice to narrate a 2-part documentary series on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It was his way of honoring the lessons and the calm it had brought into his life. Moving on to Laurie Anderson, when she and her husband, Lou Reed, connected. They were both at a turning point, reevaluating their artistic journeys and how spiritualism fit into their lives. Their relationship wasn't just about art. It was built on shared values and a deeper understanding of life. Together, they came up with 3 simple rules to live by, something Anderson says became their guideposts. "I'm just going to tell you what they are because they come in really handy," Anderson once shared. "Because things happen so fast, it's always good to have a few, watchwords to fall back on. Practical, thoughtful, and profoundly grounded, just like their approach to life and art." Laurie Anderson and Lou Reed's 3 life rules are the kind of wisdom you want to scribble down and keep forever. They went like this. 1. Don't be afraid of anyone. Now, can you imagine living your life afraid of no one? 2. Get a really good bullshit detector. And 3. Be really, really tender. With those 3 things, you don't need anything else. Simple, powerful, and timeless. Anderson added her own perspective to this philosophy by absorbing the wisdom around her and creating her own rules. For her, part of that process was diving into the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The book left such an impression that she created an album inspired by its teachings, turning ancient ideas into a modern artistic expression. It's the perfect example of blending the spiritual with the creative. Now, let's fast forward to the 1990s. Spiritualism might have been overshadowed by the rise of beer-soaked grunge, but Radiohead kept the old-school artistic spirit alive. Tom York was on a mission to explore transcendence through his music, and one of his standout tracks, I Might Be Wrong, tackled the idea of moving beyond the physical world. York described the track as a snapshot of a crisis moment in his life. He shared, "I used to think there was nothing left at all." He recalled a surreal experience one night while living near a beach. As he stood outside and looked back at his empty house, he saw a figure walking around inside, even though he knew no one was there. That strange presence stuck with him, and he channeled it into the song. The result is a haunting yet deeply reflective piece that captures the search for meaning in the unknown. During a chaotic chapter in his life, Tom York found solace by pulling away from the noise and seeking peace in solitude. He spent his time reconnecting with nature and observing the cycle of life and death. Reflecting on this period, York shared, "I spent a lot of time watching things die, walking a lot in vast landscapes, watching the seasons change, ancient rocks, rotting carcasses, flowers blossoming, rivers gurgling. Alongside these meditative moments, he turned to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, letting its teachings guide his introspection and influence his music. Then there's Patty Waters, a name that may not ring as many bells, but played a pivotal role in shaping cultural history. Sometimes it's not the most famous figures who spark a movement. It's those with fresh ideas at just the right time, inspiring others to take those ideas and run with them. Patty Waters, a jazz singer with an unparalleled gift for raw emotion, was one of those people. Drawing inspiration from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Waters embraced the concept of letting things flow naturally. She translated this idea into her music by creating an open, swirling sound filled with raw, wandering emotions. Her work was an experience, a maelstrom of feelings that left an indelible mark on the artists and movements that followed. Patty Waters' unbound, free-flowing style didn't just stay in her corner of jazz. It set off a chain reaction that directly influenced trailblazers like Yoko Ono and Diamanda Galás. These artists, in turn, left their own marks, inspiring the Beatles, George Harrison's solo work, and beyond. In a way, this domino effect mirrors the central message of the Tibetan Book of the Dead itself. The text emphasizes the power of thought and its lasting impact, famously stating, "Our past thinking has determined our present status, and our present thinking will determine our future status. For man is what man thinks." It's a cycle that flows through art, life, and spiritual understanding. Profound, continuous, and endlessly interconnected. This idea of interconnected cycles naturally leads us to one of life's biggest mysteries, the question that has haunted and fascinated humans for centuries. What happens when we die? What happens to us when we die? It's the ultimate question, the kind that's kept humanity up at night since we first stopped dragging our knuckles through the muck and started pondering the big stuff. Do we simply vanish into the void, ceasing to exist? Are we thrown back into the mix as fresh-faced babies, or maybe even animals, on some endless karmic loop of reincarnation? Or is there a white light waiting for us, the one we've heard about in near-death experiences on shows like Oprah or Larry King Live? The warm glow, the smiling faces of loved ones long gone. It's comforting, right? Then there's the classic Christian image. St. Peter standing at the pearly gates, clipboard in hand, checking if your reservation for eternity in the kingdom of heaven is confirmed. Why does the question of what happens when we die cling to us so tightly? In his book, How Plato and Pythagoras Can Save Your Life, Nicholas Kardaras explores the idea that humans are unique in their ability to ponder this, because we're the only species capable of mentally traveling through time. We can project ourselves into the future, and what do we inevitably find? Death. And that realization? It shakes us to the core. Some might say it scares the hell out of us, or maybe even scares the heaven and hell into us. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ernest Becker tackled this existential terror in his groundbreaking work, The Denial of Death. Becker argued that everything we create, our art, our towering buildings, our religions, and even our drive to have children, is rooted in one primal urge: to deny our mortality. It's all a way to soothe the deep-seated anxiety, what psychologists call thanatos anxiety, that there might be nothing beyond this physical existence. The common wisdom says we'll never really know what happens after we die, because no one has ever come back to tell us. But that might not be entirely true. Beyond the near-death experiences, or NDEs we've heard about, documented by psychologists like Dr. Raymond Moody in Life After Life and Dr. Kenneth Ring in Mindsight, there's another phenomenon that challenges our assumptions. It involves children who, without the drama of an NDE or the influence of hypnotic regression, spontaneously recall vivid details of past lives. These cases are rigorously studied, well-documented, and leave us wondering, could these glimpses into past lives hold the answers we're searching for? When it comes to children recalling past lives, these stories aren't about extravagant claims of being Cleopatra or Napoleon. Instead, they're far more grounded and, in many cases, eerily specific. These kids often recount memories of ordinary people who passed away relatively recently, sometimes just months or a few years before their birth. What's truly fascinating is the level of detail. They'll name parents, siblings, and other relatives. They'll describe their previous villages, homes, or districts. They'll even recall what they did for a living and, most strikingly, provide vivid, accurate descriptions of how they died. Here's where it gets even more unsettling. Some of these children bear physical signs, birthmarks or congenital defects that match the cause of death they claim to have experienced in a past life. Often, these injuries were traumatic in nature, like scars from fatal wounds or marks where the body might have been pierced. The correlations are startling and difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. And if you're thinking these accounts sound too wild to be true, consider this. Over 3,000 of these cases have been rigorously documented. What's even more surprising is that this research, far from being some fringe endeavor, has been conducted at a major U.S. university for more than 40 years. It's a reminder that the question of life after death may not be as unanswerable as we once thought. At the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, groundbreaking research into reincarnation has been ongoing for decades. Dr. Jim B. Tucker continues the work of his predecessor, Dr. Ian Stevenson, who began this research in 1967 and devoted nearly 40 years of his life to it. Stevenson traveled the globe with his team, methodically interviewing, photographing, and documenting these astonishing cases of children who vividly recalled past lives. Stevenson's dedication to rigor and accuracy was unparalleled. In his books, such as 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation and Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect, he outlined the methods his team used to verify the children's claims. They cross-checked details like names, places, occupations, and causes of death against official records and interviews with surviving family members of the deceased. If there was any evidence that a child might have been exposed to the details of the prior life through stories, media, or other sources, Stevenson rejected those cases as inconclusive. Only cases where no other explanation could account for the memories were accepted as being suggestive of reincarnation. This careful approach ensured that the research wasn't dismissed as speculation or wishful thinking. By setting such high standards for evidence, Stevenson and his team created a body of work that challenges conventional understanding and opens the door to fascinating possibilities about what might happen after death. Does this prove that there's life after death? That's for you to decide. What's more, there have been controlled double-blind experiments showing that intercessory prayer, praying for someone's healing from afar, can yield positive recovery outcomes. This has been observed in coronary and oncology patients, suggesting that something intangible may be at play. Then there's the fascinating work of Dr. William Tiller and his team at Stanford, who conducted repeatable experiments demonstrating that focused meditative thought could alter the properties of material objects. In one case, they showed that the pH level of water could be raised or lowered simply by concentrated intention. Skeptics might shrug and ask, so what? What does changing the pH of water have to do with life after death? It's a fair question, but here's the thing. If even a fraction of the research mentioned holds up under scrutiny, it takes a big hole in the dominant materialist paradigm system. The idea that everything in the universe operates solely through physical, mechanistic processes. This worldview precludes the possibility of metaphysical phenomena, such as thoughts influencing biology or consciousness surviving after death. But if the evidence for these outlier phenomena is valid, it forces us to question the completeness of that materialist view. A solid theory should account for all the data, not just the easy-to-explain parts. If the mechanistic model can't explain these phenomena, then it's likely incomplete, or even flawed. And that opens the door to alternative perspectives that can incorporate metaphysical realities, like the ones documented in this research. Theoretical physics already offers us glimpses of such possibilities. Quantum mechanics, string theory, and holographic theories of the universe suggest a reality that's far stranger and more complex than the materialist model allows. If these alternative paradigms can explain phenomena like the influence of thought on physical matter or the persistence of consciousness beyond the body, they could radically reshape how we understand life, death, and everything in between. This leads us to the ancient Greeks, who weren't just mildly curious about death. In fact, they were obsessed with it. From harvest and fertility festivals to myths rooted in underworld lore, and even death recreating Orphic rites, they leaned all the way into the concept of mortality. But why? Why this fixation on the underworld and what lies beyond? Plato offers us a clue. He called philosophy a kind of death before dying. This wasn't about morbidity, it was about enlightenment. Plato and Pythagoras believed that by confronting the transient nature of the physical body, we could better grasp the eternal essence of the soul. To the Greeks, true understanding came from peeling back the illusion of the material world and getting a glimpse of what some might call ultimate reality. The Greeks saw it as a kind of hero's journey, a phrase later popularized by Joseph Campbell. Facing your mortality and the darker corners of your psyche, your shadow side, was an essential part of achieving personal integration and spiritual growth.